Hello there. Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 8 books, host of 2 PBS specials. Here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity, and compassion into everything you do. I mentioned compassion this time because that is the subject that I want to talk about, especially compassion and how some people are afraid that it sets us up to be manipulated. There is a quote that I'm sending out to those 6,000 folks on my quote list. And by the way, if you ever want to receive one of my favorite quotes each week, along with 2 or 3 paragraphs about how to apply that quote to life, all you got to do is go to my website, billcrawfordphd.com, or just Google Bill Crawford, Ph.D. I'll come up on the first page. Hit the subscribe button, put your name and email address in. It's free. And each week I will send you one of my favorite quotes, along with 2 or 3 paragraphs about how to apply that quote to life. So this quote is one of mine. It says, "Compassion no more makes us vulnerable to manipulation than understanding makes us vulnerable to making bad decisions." Let's unwrap that a little bit, see how it can serve us today. Because I think we've all had the experience of feeling manipulated by someone. They did something in some ways and we found ourselves kind of stuck and not being able to respond the way we want to. We felt manipulated, and that doesn't feel good. And so the way a lot of people have determined that I'm going to keep myself safe from that is just, okay, well, I just don't want to care about that person anymore. I just want to, because compassion or caring seems to make me vulnerable to that. I think that's not problematic. That is problematic in several ways. Number one, it makes them more dangerous. It kind of defines them as dangerous and as someone who has the power to manipulate us. It defines us as someone without compassion and someone who can be manipulated. And it has us using fear of something in order to stay safe. So since we don't want any of those, I suggest we choose awareness. That quote from Albert Einstein that I use in so many of my books and seminars: problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. I love that, because I think it really speaks to how what we really want to use is awareness versus worry or fear or avoidance to stay safe in challenging situations. And when we're dealing with someone who wants to manipulate us, that is indeed a challenging situation. And for those of you who are familiar with my life from the top of the mind philosophy, you know that when we see someone as dangerous or see ourselves as having been manipulated or can be manipulated or try to use fear as a way of staying safe, that actually throws us into this lower reactive brain. And that has us feeling angry, frustrated, resentful, all the negative emotions that we really don't like to feel. Probably not something we would recommend to someone we love. And I think we can use awareness to also bring understanding into the situation, that in a way that allows us to be compassionate and still stay safe. How do we do that? Well, if we take this life from the top of the mind philosophy and recognize we've got these 3 parts to the brain: brainstem, limbic system, neocortex. Brainstem is indeed the reactive part of the brain. Limbic system is kind of the scanner, processor, router. The neocortex, the upper 80% of the brain, what I call the top of the mind, this is where we have access to our interpersonal skills, our problem-solving skills, clarity, confidence, creativity, compassion, etc. In other words, it's this upper 80% of the brain that allows us to be more purposeful and effective in our life and sometimes in the lives of others. So if we can begin to recognize we don't want to throw ourselves into this lower 20% of the brain by seeing them as dangerous, seeing us as someone who has no compassion or can be manipulated, and using fear to be safe, then we also can understand how they may be using fear as a kind of a decision point to go for manipulation. If they're afraid that we don't like them, or we won't do what they want us to do, or that we won't listen to them, or the only way they can get anybody to do anything is through manipulation, then we've got to recognize that they're coming from that fear-based brain. And if we can see them as coming from the fear-based brain, we can change our definition from dangerous to frightened. If we can see someone who's coming from the fear-based brain as frightened, then we don't really aren't threatened by a frightened person. And what we can do is respond to them with compassion without the worry about being manipulated. Well, I want you to do this, and if you don't do this, you're going to be a horrible person, and guilt and shame and all the kind of stuff that people try to use. We can go, yeah, I can understand how you'd want me to do that. That's just not something that works for me. Now, if you would like me to give the situation some thought and get back to you with something that would work for me, I would be happy to do that. Well, I think you should do this and that and this and that and that and da, 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 da. Yeah, I can see how you would want that. And that is really just something that doesn't work for me. See, that's a very calm, compassionate statement. We're not kind of trying to change them or in some ways make them wrong. We're just setting what I call a very healthy, loving boundary. This can be good for us, of course, but it can also be good for them. Because here's the problem. The reason someone is generally manipulative is because manipulation has worked for them, They have probably found that they can manipulate people and get them to do whatever it is they want them to do. When we let them know through this very calm, loving perspective, this healthy boundary, that, yeah, that's not really something that's going to work for me, that actually gives them the message that manipulation isn't effective. And who knows, they may change as a result of that. Now, this isn't about them changing. It isn't about changing them so that we won't feel manipulated. This is about us recognizing that no one can manipulate us without our permission, without us seeing them as dangerous, without defining ourselves as someone who can be manipulated, and without then trying to use fear as a way of staying safe. So what I suggest you do is recognize that compassion is probably a quality or characteristic you would list as one of the things that you feel good about who you are. It's something we would probably teach to those we love. And now we can be very clear that it doesn't make us more vulnerable to someone. It actually gives us the opportunity to create this very healthy, loving boundary. This is what I love to do. Go around the world teaching people, families, and organizations and relationships basically how to bring a more purposeful way of life. The book I wrote is called Life from the Top of the Mind. It's the system for how to do this. This is now on Audible, by the way, for those of you who like to listen to this. And if you would like me to come to your organization or work with your family or you around kind of helping you access this clear, confident, creative, compassionate part of who you are and kind of be safe and powerful from this upper 80% of the brain, I would love to do that. All you got to do is go to my website, BillCrawfordPhD.com, hit the contact button, let me know what you're interested in, and I'd love to talk with you about that. In the meantime, here's to you, bringing more clarity, confidence, creativity, and compassion into everything you do. And I look forward to seeing you in the future.